Welcome to Pass the Torch, where we ignite purpose, passion, and potential in early childhood development, one conversation at a time. Hi, I'm Diane from At Love to Create Educational Platform, and we are overexcited to bring you another episode about the magic of storytelling. Our guest is Martin Schwella. He describes himself as a goofy dad, entrepreneur, children's book author and illustrator, and a dreamer. But before we go on, we would really like to thank Nicola from Regis Office Suits in George, where we are doing our recording today. We'll see you in a while.
Stories.
Kom luister saam. Schink Stories bied Afrikaanse audio-stories wat nie net opvoedkundig is nie, maar ook toerus met morele waardes, waardevolle lewenslesse en hulle karakter help bou. Sluit aan by Schink Stories en bou jou kind se karakter, een storie op 'n slag. Nou ja, sien julle vir storietyd.
Stories.
Welcome back to our episode on the magic of storytelling. And as I said, we have a wonderful and interesting guest here today. Martin, welcome. Welcome to our podcast. And I mentioned in the first introduction, you describe yourself as a goofy dad. And and you've got such a lot of talent regarding storytelling. But I want to start and ask you, can you tell us about yourself and your journey up to now regarding being a illustrator?
And thanks for having me. It's such a privilege to be here on your podcast. I always include Goofy Dad because that's part of who I am, and I think my kids bring out the goofiness in me. So they give me actually the permission to be goofy and actually to create that into my work. So I'm an illustrator by trade. I started as an illustrator in my career, and then in about 2017 I published my first children's book, and now I've authored a lot of them, and also I write children's stories as well. So not just for books, for children's songs, audio stories, video stories, puppet shows, the work. So everything regarding children's content or stories for them.
Oh, wonderful. And just in short, what inspired you to start to become an illustrator and move on to children's stories?
Well, my mother, she always tells a story that she saw me playing on the carpet in my room as a child, and I was a very dreamy child, so I didn't. I enjoyed being in my imagination and wandering around. And of course, when I had toys in my hands, I started playing. She said it was like a Spielberg movie playing off there in that room. And I remember my version of that. And then I started discovering that drawing can actually open up a world of imagination that wasn't always possible. So I started realizing that in art, or in drawing specifically, it's a blank page and you can do whatever you want to, and then of course whatever your skill allows you to do. So I started sharpening that axe, and started illustrating, drawing, and just I was in love with the feeling of that. And every time I started improving, I just wanted to have more and discover more. And since my original passion was telling of stories, like on that carpet floor in my room, I started realizing that I can tell stories with the illustrations that I'm doing, and that actually inspired me to go back into storytelling, using the art for that conceptualization. But my boyhood dream is to do animated movies for any audience, but mainly focused on the youth and children. So yeah, it's just all one journey in that direction. So the stories really inspired me to go into art.
Yeah, and I heard you mention that a blank page, and that is what it actually is. Myself being in the early childhood development sector, is that a child is actually like a blank page and they start their journey and whatever naturally comes. And I think storytelling is to open up that imagination or fill in the pages, as I say. And that is how a wonderful journey starts. And it's wonderful for
Mm,
you sharing that as a child. And I can relate to that. And it's, I think storytelling is such a uh, wonderful tool to open up a child's world, per
mm.
se. If I may ask you, if you start creating a story, and I've seen your stories and I've listened to your stories, what does come first, the words or the character or a specific picture or an experience?
Any of the above. So there's not a specific recipe. Sometimes I just sit and I do like a create session when I'm just illustrating. I just say I don't want to force anything. I just want to play around with drawing. I still do this to this day, and then I illustrate a character on that day, and I start getting curious about what's this character's story, or why is that expression on his face, or whatever the case might be, and that then I'll explore that with writing, and then other stories start by I witness a situation and I see the value in that lesson that is learned. I have a house with 4 kids in, so under the age of 9. So sometimes something happens there, and I'm inspired to like emphasize that lesson that the experience has actually taught them. And also being a father, I see the value in that. And then the other times, I hear a need in schools or by a parent. One example that we have on Schink stories is a recent story called I Pisang. It basically translates to something like "Oh banana." So it's a banana character that goes through big emotion, and this story was inspired by a teacher asking me about, do you have something on big emotions for the kids? And I said no, but then I started doing my research and crafting a story around that theme. So there's never a specific starting point, but there's always a spark that happens by some other way, and then I go down that journey.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think there's so many emotions and things coming to the forefront. And as I said,
Mm,
storytelling is really a wonderful tool to relate to
mm,
and make it for kids understandable. But I
mm.
want to also, how does a character develop that relates to children?
Well, once again, there's not a specific recipe. Um, I always try to focus on who I'm creating the story for. So if it's for, let's say, preschoolers in grade R, or it's maybe for a child that's maybe a bit older, or a child that doesn't really understand lots of words yet, then that basically forms my direction of how to communicate this character. But I think all the stories that we do is built around. I've been quoted on saying this, but I believe that a story has like a little key inside, and my purpose is to give that key, and maybe it can open a door for whoever is hearing that story. So let's say it's a story about fairness or a story about owning up to your mistakes, then I would include that into the story. And with regards to the character, I always try to say I focus on the audience, and I want them to relate to that character. So I would always, let's say it's a child that uh, there's a story about maybe a child that pushes around the other kids like rough play or the speelikies. Um, then I would amplify that in the character so that the child can see that, and maybe they can have like an outside perspective on that. And when they want to repeat that behavior again, maybe that key might come into place and it will open that door so they can maybe move on from doing that, or whatever the theme is. So that's always my focus, is to give the key in a digestible way to whoever must receive it.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, and I think if parents can use stories, if there's an emotion or a big emotion popping up, is that to use that story and relate it back to them and say, can you remember about what happened there? And it's understandable for children if it's done on that level.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. So our purpose on Schink stories is that we want to create stories that, I'm going to just say in Afrikaans because it rhymes, motiveer, leer, en inspireer. So it motivates, it learns, and it inspires. That's our main categories we want to focus on. But we want to equip the parents with a tool so they can use it, like you mentioned. And in some cases, when the parents meet me, when we're at an event or something, they tell me that my child was shy, and they said, no, I must do like this character or whatever the case, and that always warms my heart. But so the tool goes both ways. It's just, we're going to have control on who's going to use it. Is it the parents that going to say, remember, let's say character Sirlamunki or whoever did this, and you can also try to do it now, or maybe the child does it on their own. So we don't have control on for that, but it can be a valuable game changer for the child.
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin. And we'll be go on a ad break, and we'll be with you in a short while. All right, and welcome back. And in this part of the podcast, we're going to talk about themes and values of stories. Martin, what are some of the core values you try to weave into your stories?
Diane, yeah, so our stories are being advertised as having life lessons and good values. So that's not a really defined statement, but that's just a broad category. And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, that at Schink Stories, we're focusing on creating stories that motivate, learn, and inspire. So any value that fits into that space. So, for example, if you're telling a story to preschoolers again, or maybe children up to grade 3, I think that's about our cutoff for our story platform. So we'll look at values that's essential for the kid in that phase of their journey. So maybe it's something on fairness, maybe it's about having compassion, maybe it's about sharing, how to speak to others, to be kind, to have respect. So I'm not fixed on a specific set of values, because as a creative, if you put in too many rules, then you squash the creativity. So, but we're focusing on values that build the child. We want to focus on specifically character building. So we want to inspire a child to go into school with a healthy character, so that they can, if I can put it in an adult way, to be a good human being. So maybe not being mean to others, or take someone else's stuff, or talk over someone else. And these are the flaws that we all actually have. It's just more obvious in children. But I can't give you a specific list of values, but because there's so many specific nuances to something as well. So we have 4 different stories about how children talk. So the one is more based on the type of words they use. Is it insulting or not? The other story is more focused. It's a peacock that's just talking about himself, and he's not listening to what others are saying. So it communicates more to have an interest in conversation, like a conversation goes both ways. And then there's stories about just someone that just talks a lot. Story called Bubble Bessie. It's a duck that a little duck that swallows cookie syrup, a bar of soap.
Yeah.
And then when she talks, there's bubbles all around. And at the end of the story or in the middle of the story, there's too much bubbles around, so she can't see the people around her. So there's a different way to communicate the values, and that's the freedom that creativity offers. And it can reach a more niche part of the audience or the group that we're talking to. So we focus on the target audience and then base the values for that specific collection of stories on that.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's not a specific, but built into a story, I think there's a lot of values actually in one story. Is to be aware about it. Obviously, there must be kindness or empathy or perseverance of honesty or whatever. So at the end of the day, in there would be a main, like a life skill in it, but in between the lines, I'm sure there's other values also hidden away in a story. So
Sorry, I just want to add to that. On our stories, we say there's a one theme, like maybe it's honesty or fairness. It's not Afrikaans, so I'm just messing up my words.
Yeah.
But then we give a short synopsis of the story so the parent can understand without listening to the story more or less what it's about.
Yes.
Apologies about that. And then we also give we also say 3 life lessons that can be found in the story. If there is 3, we don't always just give 3 because of that statement, but then the parent can use that as a way to say, hey, you saw the character that this specific thing, or they learned this thing, we should try that as well, or whatever the case may be. So that's something we are focusing on to help the parents specifically.
Yeah. And I think if we come to the significance of stories, I think we did mention it. It is a tool, but there's so many other benefits as well. Like for instance, language. If you come to think of it, is there any other benefits regarding just language?
Well, in the educational phase of a child's life, there's lots of practical benefits, like their vocabulary. Now my vocabulary is teaching me the ability to talk, the ability to communicate. Usually, you learn by seeing or by hearing how it's applied, and that's what excites me about a story, because it has lots of dynamics that can teach. So there's a physical scene that's playing off. So if it's in a book, or maybe it's on stage, or maybe it's a video, or just in your imagination as you're hearing this story, in our case. But the child is basically being witness to something that's playing off. So they're learning a specific skill just by not experience, but it's as if they're experiencing something. So you can teach them something good out of the experience. And then, like you mentioned, taalvaardigheid, like their language develops. I like to put in words into the stories that are a bit bigger, so the kids learn words that are maybe above what they hear in their everyday interactions at their school. And then also we have a story, just the quickest example that I'm thinking of. It's called Shimpi's Symphony. So it's a chimpanzee that's is dreaming of becoming like a director for a symphony orchestra. But in the story, we're telling the story of how he's dreaming about and how he's being mocked by the others, and then eventually he reaches his dream. But in the story, I like to write in rhyme specifically as well. But then we go through the instruments that you would see in a symphony orchestra, and the place where the place where it happens, and the famous musicians that has been there in the past. So we try to put that in, and that story specifically, we see children repeating like Tchaikovsky and Bach and Beethoven, like those names in that rhyme, and they they're actually learning the general knowledge expands. They just to get back to the question, the imagination, the ability to imagination helps you to problem solve. So if the imagination becomes stronger, your problem solving skills become better. There's lots of specific skills that gets developed, but in our case, we're not focused on that, but it is a byproduct of what we do, and it is that makes it valuable. But ultimately, we just want to inspire kids to maybe use those T's that I mentioned, or maybe to venture out and use the vocabulary that they're learning or the skills that they're learning. So that's our primary focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if I could come in, like in the educational perspective, is that
Mm.
definitely emotional intelligence, listening skills, absolutely, and obviously part of the cognitive development as well.
Definitely.
And yes, would you say that stories or storytelling or story time is a safe space for a child?
It should be. I don't think I mean this is a larger conversation on the whole screen time thing, TV shows that kids are seeing. Like there's value still in spending time as a parent with your child in with a story time routine. We promote books. I had a comment the other day of a woman saying that uh, can't the children read themselves? Like we promote that actually, like the parent sitting in their room or sitting on the couch in a calm space and reading the story. Or in our case with Schink stories, we actually promote that parents sit with their child, listen to that one story, and afterward discuss the story with each other and spend that time together. So definitely, it should be a safe space. Our content specifically, we focus on wholesome content, no zombies and uh, stuff that like the counter to the good values that I spoke of earlier. But it should definitely be a space where kids can feel safe, that they can trust that what they are hearing or the story they are enjoying, they won't be surprised by a scary character or some evil or malicious type of whatever scenario. And the parents must also trust that their kids are being exposed to something that will actually be of value, not only by the benefits, but by the environment that we're creating in that story.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it is something that we would really like to promote is to start a routine in your home. Um, anytime, well, normally it's at nighttime or when it's sleep time,
Mm,
that parents set that time aside to read a story. I think there's such a lot of
absolutely.
benefits in that, and even if maybe that specific evening you as a parent maybe haven't got the time, that you got Chink stories um,
Definitely.
on the sideline to help with that. And it has
Definitely.
got such a lot of, because as I said, at the educational perspective, um, listening skills is
Mm.
one of the things that we really must work on. So,
So
yeah.
I just want to add to that quickly. I saw with my own son when he was still little. I made a point to every night just read a book to him, and I realized that he has a great vocabulary. He talks very well, like structured sentences, and he knows how to talk because he's listened to it every night when I go with intention as a parent. And the same thing happens with the Shink stories, as you mentioned. Like the child gets that benefit, those benefits that we were speaking of, every night when they take time to do that as a parent. So there's definitely advantage, not only just the, let's say, the marshmallow stuff like being cozy and bonding and all those benefits, but there's definitely like an academic benefit to spending that time. You don't have to use Shink stories. We're obviously promoting that as well, but just take that time. Maybe just tell a story out of your head. You don't have to have a book even, but it's so valuable that the parent takes the child through that, because it establishes a habit that will be valuable to them for the rest of their lives.
Right, you just shared your benefits that you invested in story time, and that I can also also got the experience that we really made time investing. I mean, our kids were small, the time that we had, and it's really beneficial to them, and making that time. It's just to build in that routine time in your day, specifically for that, because you're gonna actually see the benefits of it, as you also said. Right, we'll be back in a short while after the break. Right, welcome back, everyone, for our next part of the discussion. And Martin, have you ever received any feedback regarding your stories from, say, educated or children or even parents?
Yes, we've received lots of feedback from parents. Sometimes we just get messages. Sometimes we get voice notes from the kids themselves that the parents are sending through. And when we have an event where I'm telling stories, maybe out of school, or we have some shows that parents and children come to, I always have some great conversations and feedback. The feedback that always touches me the most are the ones that they tell a story where the child has actually applied, like we mentioned earlier in the conversation, where they applied this lesson that they've learned. There was a mom that there's a story about a caveman. So the story is Grootman, Grootman, and in English we've already translated it. It's caveman, brave man. But the essence of the story is the caveman is too shy and he's in his cave, and then he hears all the friends playing outside, but he's too shy to go play with them. And then basically, after he builds his confidence inside the cave, there's a number of things that he does inside the cave. And then he says, Grootman is a Grootman. So caveman is a brave man. And then he decides to go out and he makes a friend. And there was a story of a mom that had a similar scenario of a child, a daughter, and then she said, "No, I must be like a caveman." And then, or like the character is now, his name is Caveman. Um, so that was fantastic, and we have lots of stories like that, where kids, like my own son is now 3 years old, and we have a story about a little bakkie, a pickup, that he plays too much, and then the lesson of the story is put or set a stop in your kop, like put a stop sign in your head before you act. So they just put that pause in between, and he's been listening to that story since he was 2 years old, because the story has value to listen again. And then the last month or so, he tells my wife, "Mama, ek wou hierdie gedoen het en toe sit ek 'n stop in my kop." So he actually is telling it as a way to tell his mother that he chose the right thing. So stories like that. We of course have funny stories of children building homes in the garden for some of the characters that I've created. We've had birthday parties themed around characters that I've created, which I mean that means a lot to me, to see that the children actually make these their own and they make it a part of what they're doing. And then the one that I didn't expect, so I do the audio for the stories on the platform, and then every story it goes something like, you're now listening to a Schink story by Martin Schwella, but it's in Afrikaans now. So the one child, the mother told me, he's playing there in the living room and he's walking out of his chest and he's like, "I am Martin Schwella. I am Martin Schwella." So only in Afrikaans. So he's actually so I didn't expect that when we were creating the stories. I want the focus to be on the characters, but lots of fun feedback regarding the the stories, not only the characters that resonate with the kids, but also the value that we intended to create it for.
Yeah. You know, and Martin, that is the reason why I've contacted and invited you to this podcast, is that you've got so many experience and that you've gone through with this journey of yours. And this is so we want to illustrate that to the listeners about storytelling. And yeah,
Awesome.
I know you're an illustrator as well, and not just an author and a dreamer and an entrepreneur. But I want to focus a bit about on the illustrate parts and how does your illustration actually enhance or support your stories?
Um, well, I think it plays a massive role in just giving lead to the imagination. So in a children's, say, a normal picture book, you have lots of pictures going on. So in the beginning of my journey, I wanted to create books without any words in them, but that would obviously not work. So, but the intent was that the illustration should convey a lot of what's happening to give that context. But so the text and the illustrations, they kind of dance together and to stimulate the imagination. So with the audio story, we're focusing on low stimulus to the children. So we only display one illustration while the story is playing, so the child can have enough, or their imagination is fed with one character or an emotion or expression, that one focus point of the story that they can then further play with while they're listening to the story in their own imagination. So it plays a massive role. And I always said at the beginning of my career, when I started doing illustrations professionally for books, I said the most valuable asset of the illustration is that it must convey emotion, because everyone understands emotion. If you show a laughing character to a baby that can't talk, it will probably smile at it. If you show a crying character, it will probably maybe start crying together or be upset why this character is crying. So I think it sets the tone in a way, but it's not necessary, but it's a great complementary feature to
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, especially for the age group that you are writing for.
Mm.
The visuals is very important. Yes, is there a specific style or or technique that you
Well,
use?
well, I have an illustration style that has been established now for well over a decade or something like that. So, but I was originally inspired by like the anime and manga genre, and then which is all mainly for more teenage age groups and maybe young adult age groups. But the style, the way they use lines, it was just, it inspired me. When I saw it, it just grabbed me, and I just wanted to draw like that. And then also, I have a big interest like in Pixar movies and the style that they convey there. So my illustration style is a combination of what you would find in a Pixar movie and maybe like the anime genres of the past that I saw as a child. But it's also been developed into something, something of its own. It's, you won't look at it and say, "Oh, that's Pixar," or "That's." But that was my main inspirations as a child. But I think just to add to the style, it must convey emotion, so it must be expressive. Or in my case, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it certainly helps to be expressive, and it must be clear, so that whoever's looking at it can clearly see what it's trying to communicate.
Oh, wonderful. And what will your advice be to somebody that wants to like become an illustrator or a children book author?
Well, the short answer is the same answer that Nike Takis will tell you, and that's just to do it. But in to be more specific on that answer, just continue to pursue what you're doing. So when I started specifically when I started authoring my own books, I made a commitment to myself that I would show up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I would start writing or illustrating on a specific book, because in my situation back then, it was a challenge to get the time to work on that. So I started doing it, but some days are like dreadful and some days are uninspiring, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, you're not always up to it, specifically if the baby was awake through the night and stuff like that. But you have to keep showing up, because the days when it's a good day, those are gold, and you start learning what works, what not, and start putting your work out there. If in terms of illustrations, if you did an illustration that you're not proud of, like look at it and ask yourself, just to yourself, like, why didn't this work? And then next time try to improve just that one thing. But try to draw a lot. Like if that's something you want to develop, don't commit to be creating this one perfect masterpiece. Like draw one, put it to the side, draw the next one. Like make 100 drawings. I'm sure you'll be able to give us advice after you've done 100 drawings of your own. So just go out and do it. Form that habit, and it will happen by itself.
Oh, wonderful. That's a lovely sharing that information. And what would you say is there one specific book that inspired you, or a story, or is there many?
There's many of them. I can put it in a broad sense, and I can maybe just tell you about my first book then. So there's lots of stories like Toy Story, specifically Toy Story 3. That story was amazing. But so I'm passionate about telling stories, and if the times when I saw stories when I was growing up, and the story was like the storyteller was weaving the story together with the components, and it reached that point where I would get like a kind of emotional feeling, and then there would always be a little tear in my eye because everything came together. That was my main inspiration in terms of any story, and that was something that was sparked in me. So I wanted to recreate that for myself. So I'm a fan of what I create as well, but I want to recreate that so people feel the same way about what I'm creating. And then my first book is titled A True Winner, or Die Ware Wenner. It's a spin-off or a twist on the original story of the tortoise and the hare, but the essence of the story, and this might add to the advice section of the question that you just asked me. Like the rabbit in the story is just eager to win. He wants to get there quickly, and the tortoise basically enjoys the journey. He's there for his friend. He just wants to participate, show up. In Afrikaans, een tree op 'n slag is a phrase that's repeated in the book, and that story has personally meant so much to me in my journey, sometimes to an annoying extent, because it reminds me that you have to take one step at a time. And I always want to, when I have a big idea, I'm excited and I want to be like that rabbit, and I want to win now. I want to get the results now and see this dream manifest, or this result, just to add to the earlier question. But the true answer is that we must be like that tortoise, to just go one step at a time. And if you know that book, you know that the tortoise eventually helps the rabbit to win, and that makes him then the title of the book, A True Winner. So that book keeps on, or that story at least, keeps on inspiring me, to my own annoyance, because it's usually at times when I've tried to be the rabbit and failed in a certain way.
Yeah. Now I can relate to that, and that is what our podcast is also all about: is one conversation at a time. And
Yeah, exactly.
one step at a time.
Our slogan for Schink Stories is actually this year is een storie op 'n slag. So it's the same, one story at a time.
Fantastic. Right. And we'll be back in a short while. welcome back, everyone. And we're coming nearly to the end of our podcast. And Martin, yes, I think what I wanted to ask you is what's the next project?
Well, at the moment, and we're focusing on our online platform, Schink Stories, or Schink Stories, then it's basically the same name. So we're building that platform in terms of stories at the moment. It's Afrikaans focused. At the moment, it's mainly focused on audio tales. We're building on expanding into English and then also expanding into some more video related content as well that we're currently producing. And so our main focus is focusing on Schink Stories. You can see it on shink.co.za. And we just want to expand that platform so that we can further build on what it's offering. Furthermore, we are building or we are creating story books, physical books that are based on some of the most popular stories as well. So everything around Schink Stories at the moment. That's our focus for the next year or two.
Wonderful. That's wonderful news. Going into a journey of English as well. And what is the, I would say, advice you would like to give to our listeners?
Well, I just want to keep it simple. Somewhere I heard the quote that play is the best way to learn. So don't be too serious about be serious about learning in school, but remember that playfulness and imagination and creativity sometimes become the best teachers. So have fun, play, and discover what the possibilities are.
Fantastic. Martin, thank you so much for your time. This was a very insightful and a lovely discussion we had about the magic of stories. And there's so much benefits that we can get from that. But thank you for your time. And I hope to maybe see you next year, maybe with your English stories or whatever. And we can have a discussion again. And we'll see you next time. And remember to subscribe to our podcast.